Welcome to the Back to Health podcast, where we share inspirational stories of hope to help you reclaim your health. If you're suffering from a chronic condition and have been given little to no hope, if you've been told that there's nothing wrong with you, but you know there definitely is something wrong, or if you're just trying to be preventative and want to know how to reclaim your health, then this podcast is for you. I can't wait to share today's episode. Hello, it's the Back to Health podcast, and I'm your host, Rashani Mahendran. Today, we're talking about all things hormones, belly fat, and stress. So if you're a woman that is in her 30s or above and you're suffering with any hormone imbalances, then this episode is for you. My guest today is Alicia Jones, and she is a widely recognized fitness and weight loss expert with over 15 years of experience transforming the health and lives of women over 50 who feel young at heart and excited to live the second half healthy and strong. Alicia blends the best science-backed strategies for fat loss, strength, and optimal health over 50 with simple tricks to transform restriction into the freedom to live life on your terms. She shared her expertise with various publications such as the Huffington Post, Alive magazine, and Mind, Body, Green. This episode has so many nuggets of wisdom. You're going to love it. Hi, Alicia. Thank you so much for making time to speak to me today.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here today.
I'm really excited for this episode because when you first emailed me and we exchanged like, oh, we could talk about this and we could talk, there's just so many aspects of sort of women's health and hormonal health and stress and all that stuff that we could talk about. But this one in particular, I feel is like such a pain point for many women. And that is the stress and its relation to like belly fat and like, how do I get over this issue of like, I can do everything else. I can lose weight everywhere else, but my belly, like I just cannot get over this. And obviously it does affect perimenopausal and menopausal women like a lot more, and obviously that's your area of specialism and the women that you work with. And I guess before we dive into all these like really juicy topics, it'd be lovely to know like how you got into this work and what attracted you here, and how you got to working with like women over 50 in particular.
Yes, because I am not over 50, but every day I am getting closer. That's what I always say. Well, actually, it has to do a lot with how I grew up. So I grew up around really strong women, lovely women. My grandmother raised me and my mother raised me. My grandmother growing up was my main caregiver when my mom was at work. But my grandmother grew up in a time when smoking was the norm. Like she was a smoker, a heavy smoker, and she was a nurse. That shows how normal it was back then to be a smoker. So she smoked a lot her whole life. And then by the time I was about 4 years old, she had all of the health issues that go along with smoking. She had COPD, she had heart failure, and she really wasn't able to take care of me anymore. And that, as a granddaughter, that really affected me. I was watching her health decline, and honestly, that's what I associated with aging. For a long period of time, I associated that as you get older, you have to get sick, you have to slow down, and you're not able to be around or take care of people in the same way. And then many years later, she passed. But at the same time as this is going on, my mother, eventually we're getting to around the same age that my grandmother was when she passed, which was in her mid 70s. No, actually, she started to really decline in her mid 70s, but it was in her 80s by the time she passed. So that was like a decade of really poor health. And as my mother started to reach that age, it was the complete opposite. My mother never smoked, never drank. This woman here in Canada, I'm from Toronto area, like the greater Toronto area. There's the CN Tower. It's 1,776 steps. My mom was doing the CN Tower climb with me. She was, she's now taking care of the grandkids. Wow. Yeah. She was actually my marketing for a long time, because a lot of my clients at that time who were over 50, they're saying, I'm too old for that. I can't do that. I'm not going to climb 1,776 stairs. And I was like, my mom's doing it. My mom at the time was 72. And I said, and that was my campaign. I said, if she's 72, so can you, right? She was able to do it. And she really inspired people with her health. And so there was this huge contrast, right? On the one side was my grandmother who had the ailing health. And at the other side was my mom, who was aging and able to do all of the things that she did when she was younger. And so I saw this contrast and I thought, this is such This is so powerful. You really do need to take care of your health, and you can still have the energy and you can still have the strength, and you can still work towards being your healthiest self in your 70s, in your 80s, 90s, and beyond. And I also see what happens when you don't do that, when you don't take care of yourself. So that's how I got started with helping mostly women over 50.
And that is so powerful because it always reminds me that our kids are watching. And so, what we do with our health, what we do with our bodies, what we put into it, the way we live, the lifestyle is so, so important because they're watching. And like you did with your grandmother, you made that inference of aging means ailing. Like you have to get, as you get older, you get sick. And I had the same experience because many people in my family, my culture, as they get older, they get sicker.
Mhm.
And when you hit this certain age, you get diabetes. And when you get to this certain age, you get cholesterol.
Yeah.
And when you get to this certain age, you get BP. And it's almost like a pattern that you can see that actually sets off for me like, oh, when I get close to 40, I'm probably going to get hormonal issues. Like my mum really suffered badly with like womb issues and like, you know, heavy bleeding and all that kind of stuff. And I sort of get that anxiety of I'm approaching that age because my grandmother also had issues, so maybe like that's me now and I'm next in line. But that is also part of the reason why I've decided to become preventative about my health, because it's like, well, I don't want to go down that route, and what lifestyle factors have contributed to this, and what can I do to prevent that me being next in line, and therefore avoid my daughter then thinking that's also going to be what you know, where she's going to end up when she hits that particular age. So yeah, I'd love to just dive into this topic about hormones and the belly fat and the stress and perimenopausal and yeah, all the good things that we're going
All
to talk
of the
about
great things, because really hormones for especially women over 50, even in your 40s, when you're in your 40s, you start to go through perimenopause can last
today.
up to a decade before you go through menopause. And really, as you get inch closer and closer and closer towards menopause, that's when you start to see the bigger and bigger changes, the shifts in mood. And anxiety, for example, is one of those big factors, right? If you get close to your cycle, you start to notice that you get more anxious and there's no real reason why. You wake up in the middle of the night, you can't fall back asleep, that sort of thing. So, and of course, it's the weight gain, right? Especially around the belly. And for some, it's not just the belly. They can't lose the weight anywhere and they don't understand. They're eating healthy. They don't know why they're gaining weight and why they can't lose the weight at all. And they're trying to exercise. And for a lot of women, I actually see that they're trying to exercise more and more and more to compensate. It's like I have to do more. What I'm doing isn't enough. If I just eat more, eat less, and I exercise more, then it's going to all work out for me. It's going to be great, and I'm going to lose weight. But then nothing happens, and there's that defeat or disappointment when they're not getting the results. And a lot of times it has to do with those hormone shifts. And all you really have to do is shift the way that you work out and the way that you eat to match your hormones, to live in harmony with your hormones. And that's when you start to release the belly fat, when you start to feel really energized. And again, it has to do with being your healthiest self too. Yeah. So the main.
And where do go
Oh,
ahead, go
no,
ahead.
no, no, no. Go ahead.
No, my question was going to be, so where do women start getting educated about how their hormones are
Mhm.
changing and what they need to do to adapt to, I guess, feed their hormones, almost is what we're saying?
Yes, yes. Feed your hormones or live in harmony with your hormones. Because let's be honest, the hormones are going to shift. Like when you go through perimenopause and menopause, especially perimenopause, your estrogen levels are fluctuating, which means that your cortisol levels are going to fluctuate as well because they're very
Mm.
interconnected. When estrogen levels are low, then your cortisol level is your adrenals actually that make up a little bit there. Your adrenals are where you produce cortisol. And at the same time, your adrenals also during perimenopause and menopause, they start trying to help create estrogen that's declining in the body. So they start trying to produce some estrogen. What ends up happening is your adrenals become fatigued, your cortisol levels rise, and you start to feel more stressed out. You start to increase the belly fat. One of the big ways that you
Mm.
know that this is starting to happen to you is that you wake up in the middle of the night and you cannot fall back asleep. Your mind is racing with 1,000 thoughts. Or maybe you wake up in the morning, and when you wake up in the morning, you don't feel rested. You feel like you have to go back to sleep. Or you need a few coffees, right? I shouldn't say that too. I love my coffee, but you need a few coffees in the morning before you can actually get up and get started. Or maybe you had a busy day the day before, and when you do wake up, you feel achy in your body. Your body is telling you that
Mm.
it is just stressed, it's heavy, and you don't feel energized anymore. And those are telltale signs, as well as the fact that you either can't lose weight or you cannot lose the belly fat specifically, that you are starting to go through those
Hmm.
cortisol shifts, those hormone shifts, and you need to start to change the way that you're eating and exercising to match that cortisol and to start to also balance out the hormone estrogen.
And am I right in thinking that even if you're younger and you're not, maybe you're not totally premenopausal, but you're suffering from adrenal fatigue, you will suffer from similar symptoms to what we're describing here? Is that
Oh,
right?
yeah. Actually, the first time I noticed that I had these symptoms, I was 25. And I was running every day. I was in university. Had a full time working in my fitness business. I was trying to do it all. I remember somebody had taken a picture of me running on the beach because that was one of my favorite activities, and they wanted to capture that moment. And I was thin everywhere except my stomach, and you could see this pouch coming. And I also never felt, I didn't feel healthy. I didn't feel strong at that time. I just felt like I was pushing myself
Mm.
through the next exercise, the next run, because I had to do that. And you could really notice. So that was at 25. That can happen at any time frame if you're starting to get some adrenal fatigue or cortisol imbalance in general. And it's time to shift things up for
Yeah.
sure. But you will notice it.
Because, because I definitely, yeah, go ahead, go
You
ahead.
will absolutely notice it more between the ages of 40, 50, and inching up 55 to about 64. Those are the highest times that you're going to start to see the the cortisol shift specifically.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes sense, but I definitely resonate with a lot of those symptoms that you mentioned because when I was going through my own health issues, and I'm very sure it was adrenal fatigue related. That's sort of what I started seeing, and you read a lot about blood sugar balancing and balance your blood sugar and do all that stuff, which definitely is like the basis of getting your health
Mhm.
right. You do need to balance your blood sugar, but it's not very much spoken about in terms of balance your cortisol, because that really is almost like the precursor to also why your blood sugar can be out of whack. Because when your cortisol levels are high, it's really important. And I was always focused on the balance your blood sugar, but I was eating well. I was doing the movement. I was doing all the things I was being told I should do to balance my blood sugar, but things were still not shifting. And until I could grab hold to the right, what's happening here with my stress levels? What's happening here with the
Mhm.
cortisol and this adrenal fatigue situation? I couldn't really shift anything until I actually understood that and got to that particular
And
point.
it's funny you mentioned that because when I was looking into you before we even started to talk to each other about the podcast, and I was excited to get to know you, and I was reading up all about you. In your bio, you were talking about the fact that you were doing it all. You're trying to take care of the kids. You were working. You were doing everything all at once, and that's when you started to have your health problems. Do you think that maybe
Yeah.
that was associated for you with cortisol levels as well?
Oh yes, definitely. Because self care was like an afterthought. If ever it was a thought, it was always like the last
Mhm,
thing. My health, most of my life, to be honest, has always been about like achieve the next thing, achieve the next
mhm,
thing. And so health and my stress levels is not something that I really paid attention to until like my body was literally screaming like, we are gonna have to shut you down because you are not paying attention to all the signs that we've been giving you. But one of the issues about that is that when you are in such a long-standing period of chronic
mhm,
stress, and it's not stress where I think I'm stressed, like I don't even notice it because that has just become the way that I am. I actually think that I'm managing myself quite well. I'm like, oh, I'm really good at juggling all these things. I'm really good at doing this for my kids and this for work and this for my husband and this for my family and this for everybody
mhm,
else apart from myself. Like I'm really good at that, and that's fine because that's just who I am. I'm a juggler.
mhm.
And that almost like became my identity, if you like I am an expert juggler, I'm really good at achieving all the things, and people would always ask me like, how do you do it all, how do you do those many things, even now I'm doing a podcast in the middle of working full time and looking after kids and dealing with my mom's health issues and all this stuff. And it's because I don't sleep enough. Like, how do you get all this stuff done? I've got to compress my hours. So yes, I am very efficient and organized and all
Mhm.
those kind of things. But at the same time, I have to compress my days, which means less sleep, less rested
Yeah.
time, more time on devices than what is healthy and good for me. And so, yeah, it definitely was a huge part, but it was unrecognized by me because I thought I was coping with everything really well. So it's underlying chronic stress that is going on for ages. And I think it's important for people to understand that stress doesn't have to look like you're flailing and you can't cope and you're overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Stress doesn't only look like that. Stress can also just mean you're so busy you don't get a chance to breathe, but you think you're
Oh, and
okay.
to bring up an amazing point with that as well, it could be the opposite, because if you're going especially before it gets to adrenal fatigue, you could be going through a period of adrenaline all the time, which means
Oh,
that, okay, I don't need to sleep as much. I'm waking up at 4 a.m. Hey, I feel rested. I can wake up at 4 or 3 or whatever it is that I have to do, or in the middle of the night if there's kids or grandkids for some, or whatever the case may be. And you actually accelerate more. Your senses are heightened, and you feel like you have these moments of feeling even like you're high, like, oh, I could take on more of this, I could take on more of this and this and this and this.
yes, yes,
And that is another early warning sign, because it actually means you're in adrenaline all the time. So you're at that phase just
yes.
before the crash comes in. Yeah. Did you ever get the
That's
crash
so
as
that's so
well?
eye-opening for
Yeah.
me. Definitely, like multiple times. And I also knew it was coming because like migraines would start like at the point where I know the crash is coming. So and in the early days I wouldn't even catch the migraine. Oh, I've got an annoying migraine, drink some more water, like carry
Yeah,
on,
take some
carry on.
Tylenol,
And then I
Advil,
would,
yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, like I don't use those things, but yeah, I definitely would just try all the things like burn some essential oils, do all this
Hmm.
stuff, and like, yeah, I can get through it, I can get through it, and just keep pushing myself through. And then sometimes your coping mechanism is like, I'll just eat that thing that makes me feel better, which is probably not good for my body, and I'll carry on. And then yes, the crash happened a few times, and when I got to that point, I was like, right, now I know like this migraine is a precursor to the crash. And I started to catch myself at the migraine
Hmm.
stage. So right, if the migraine's coming, I'm going to close all my devices and I'm going to go have a nap. Like, I just need to let whoever know that I'm going to be unavailable for a few hours, and I need to go recharge my batteries because my body is about to crash. And I got slightly better at then noticing the signs of like what is leading up to this. And now it doesn't even have to get as bad as the migraine, because then I notice the precursor to the migraine is I get some eye pain on the
Mm.
left hand side, on the side where I normally get the migraine.
Hmm.
So when my eye starts to feel like it's straining, or I start to feel a little bit twitchy in that eye,
Yeah.
now that's when I turn everything off and I go off and just try to recharge myself. So you learn
Hmm.
over time. Like, it took a while to sort of learn my signs and what the things were, but once you start listening to your body, you sort of start to figure out these are the cues that say your body's going into overdrive, you are overdoing it, you need to slow yourself down and take some time out to go recharge your batteries. And it's not always about go 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 go
Oh,
go.
totally. And I think that's actually one of the hardest things to do, right? Especially if you're a go, go,
Yes.
go or type A personality. That is the hardest thing, to actually stop, to listen to what your body's saying, take in the deep breaths and figure out, okay, what is going on in my body? What is my body saying to me? And that is the hardest part. And I
Yeah.
think that when you're going through perimenopause and menopause, that becomes difficult, because sometimes you're getting signals, but they're crossed depending on what is going on hormonally with you, right? And anxiety is
Yes.
one of those things that comes up, or high stress levels. You could actually be on the beach relaxing and having a great time, and it's downtime, but because of this shift, the estrogen levels declining, your progesterone levels maybe become progesterone dominant, and at the same time we're looking at cortisol again, it starts to rise. You could be at that beach relaxing, and all of a sudden you feel like you're getting a panic attack, or you just feel really stressed out, or you have to get
Mm.
up and go, or get up and eat sugars or carbs, because those, again, as you were speaking before, cortisol has this relationship with sugar, right? And insulin. And so your body's trying to release more sugars. Your cortisol tries to release more sugars into your body, because that's your fuel source. That's what it's, in the days when we ran away from bears, you needed more sugar in your bloodstream
Yeah.
to run away from them, right? And so that's what your body does. Your cortisol levels rise, they release the sugar levels, you then crash, and then you want more sugar because you're trying to like solve the issue of running away from a bear that doesn't exist because your hormones have shifted.
Yes.
Yeah. And then for a lot of people as well,
Yes.
they say, okay, I've also, for those that work out or had been working out before in the past, they say, okay, this is the time I have to go for a run because I'm feeling stressed out. When you feel stressed out, the general consensus is you've got to go for a run, you've got to go for a walk, you've got to lift weights, you've got to do something to expel that energy. But the system's already taxed and your cortisol levels are out of whack. So by doing
Yes.
that extra exercise, you might actually be propelling yourself into adrenal fatigue more, or anxiety, or unregulated cortisol levels. Yeah.
That was maybe one of the most eye-opening things that I learned when I suddenly figured out that, oh, this is related to adrenals, and started reading about adrenal fatigue and adrenal reset and like how do you do all that stuff. And when it said doing exercise when you're in that state is actually working against your
Mm-hmm.
body, and it just explained so many things for me, because I was like, I've tried everything. I have tried HIIT workouts, I have tried
Mm-hmm.
yoga, I've tried Pilates, I am doing as many different types of exercise as possible, like the most intense and then the most gentle, and
Mm-hmm.
nothing is shifting anything. Like
Yeah.
nothing's happening. And it's like, what am I doing? I'm eating well, I'm doing all this movement, all the different types, and none of those things are shifting. And when it was like, this is actually putting your body more into fight or flight,
Mm-hmm.
it actually gave me permission to just stop. Like, stop putting the pressure on myself, stop trying to
Mm-hmm.
force myself to do things that when I didn't make me feel good. Like, I would feel awful after doing them because I was so exhausted
Mm-hmm.
already, and then I was trying to push my body into movement, and then my body was just like, we already don't have resources, and you have now just completely depleted us into the minus,
Mm-hmm.
like in the red. And now what are you going to do? And I just have to just sit there for the rest of the day because I just would not be able to like get the energy from anywhere to do anything. And so, like, how can we start breaking this
Mm-hmm.
pattern? Like, what can we do to sort of say, take all the pressure away, and these are the steps you need to focus on? Like, don't worry about the advice about cut your calories or do more
Mm-hmm.
movement, because that's what we're all told all the time, and it just does not work when there's some hormonal imbalances in play. Or from my own experience, that's how it seems to me.
Yes.
What should women do?
Well, first and foremost, the first thing, really depends on how much stress, when you take that moment and ask yourself, how much stress do I feel like I'm under? If you feel completely crashed, that means you're at a point where your deep breathing is the best thing that you can do. When you do 4 deep inhales and then 4 deep exhales, right away, that activates the parasympathetic system, the relaxation system. It suppresses that cortisol sympathetic system, and it starts to bring calm into your body and starts to balance out your cortisol alone by doing that. But that's a crashed state. That would be the full adrenal fatigue, full I need to stop everything, full I have to sleep and I have to just eat and catch up on feeling really good again. That's where that state is. For many that are at the beginning phases, that's who I want to really talk to right now. Because if you are starting to get those symptoms like waking up in the middle of the night, I get it. I wake up to go to the washroom. But if you wake up to go to the washroom and then all of the things that you have to do in the day start going through your mind, I have to do this and I have to do that and next and next, that means that you're starting to get into a state where your cortisol levels, the actual rhythm of cortisol, might start to go off whack. So naturally, we wake up in the morning, we're supposed to have high cortisol, and that cortisol level is supposed to slowly drop throughout the day. And then by the nighttime, when you're ready to go to sleep, your cortisol is at its low and melatonin, your sleep hormone, rises, as you know. That's a natural cycle. But what happens is, for many, they wake up and their cortisol level's low. And then throughout the day, it might rise up and then down. And then at nighttime, when they're supposed to have that low cortisol, it actually spikes. And that's why you start to get things like waking up and your mind is
Yeah.
racing. It means that natural cycle is starting to get off track already. So that first step when you're at that phase is to start the deep breathing, because when you're waking up in the middle of the night, if you were to do the deep breaths, bring your mind into breathing, then you're going to start to activate the parasympathetic system when it's supposed to be relaxed, like it's supposed to be on, and your cortisol levels will drop, and you're starting to place it back into this natural rhythm. And then the next thing, if you're still in a state where you know you can work out, you feel pretty good, but it's starting to get too much. Like you're starting to do a workout, or you're starting to go for a run or a walk, and you feel tired after, the type of exercise that you do really matters. First, exercising at night, cardio especially, it's a no-go, especially for long bouts. Like I've seen it in a lot of runners and people that do triathlons and decide they're going to do a 3-hour hike, a beautiful hike that has hills, and it's still taxing to them, right? Like they think they're going to be relaxing, and really it's taxing their system. And sometimes they're doing this later in the afternoon. And when you do long bouts of exercise that are 45 minutes or longer, then you're elevating your cortisol levels and keeping them high. So normally our body would be fine with that. If our hormones are all in balance, you can go out and do the marathon, or you can go out and do the taxing exercise. Your cortisol levels rise, and then they drop down to a whole new low, because your hormones are in balance and you're adapting to this new cortisol spike that you might have by dropping to a new level. But the problem is, when you're already feeling taxed, you're asking your cortisol level to rise, stay high at a time of day. For example, if you're doing the afternoon hikes or runs or whatever the case may be, and then after doing that for 45 minutes, you're taxing out the system, and basically you're creating an imbalance in this cortisol cycle again. So it's so important at first, at this level, to keep your exercise under 45 minutes. Drop cardio for now. I actually suggest weight training, because when you do the weight training, it increases testosterone levels, and testosterone and cortisol have this relationship together. Testosterone can actually become suppressed. And we all, even women, we need our testosterone levels at a certain, we can't have as much as men. Obviously, they have like 45-fold higher testosterone than we do, but we do need to have some in order to feel energized, to feel strong, and to function. Yeah, so less than 45 minutes of exercise, preferably weight training, and deep belly breathing would be the very first place that you would be starting with.
That's so useful. And so would you suggest also that they do that in the morning, so that we avoid the peak, sort of like rising the cortisol again in the afternoon, or does it not matter sort of when that exercise
So
takes
when
place?
I speak with a lot of people that are very, very busy, it's just not possible for them to do it in the morning. You'd have to wake up even earlier, and you'd be imbalancing the cortisol levels trying to wake up even earlier, or you're trying to get more sleep. And in reality, sleep is so powerful for you to also balance your hormone
Yes.
levels. So sleep is number one, and then the exercise comes in. If you can do it in the morning, great. That's wonderful. And try doing it before about 12 or 1 in the afternoon, because that's the time frame that cortisol levels really start to do their descent. So you don't want to have those little spikes. It's also another reason why a lot of people crash at about 3 p.m. because they've dropped too low with cortisol at that time if things are off. Yeah. So it's all a delicate balance. So if the ideal would be to work out
And
before 1. And then if you can,
because I think a lot of people think that, I mean, sorry, I was just going to say, I think a lot of people do think that 3 p.m. crash, and they're all interrelated, is obviously like it's a sugar crash and you need to balance your blood sugar levels. But then behind that, you also probably need to check about the cortisol levels too, because I think sometimes the focus can be so singular that all these things are really closely connected to each other. And as I read more and more about it, I sort of said, yeah, because I am doing all the blood sugar balancing stuff, but I'm still having that, not as bad as before, but I still am having that slight crash. And then you look at the cortisol side of things, and that's a great time to start doing doing your belly breathing or drinking some extra water and just taking a mindful moment away from devices and, you know, all that kind of stuff that can really help to just balance so that you don't have to have that 3 or 4 p.m. Crash in the
That's
afternoon.
right. And another thing, I love yoga. I absolutely love yoga, but there's so many yoga programs out there that are very, very taxing on the system flows and you know, you're doing a lot of movement. And so a lot of times I get people that ask me, well, can I do yoga in the late afternoon or at the nighttime because that's relaxing, right? No, you're actually taxing the system then too. So if it's something like a gentle stretch with deep breathing, then absolutely. But if you're starting to get into yoga flows or deep, intense workouts, you want to stay away from that as well. Yeah, it has to be something that
That's
always.
really good to know, because I think sometimes it can be quite confusing sometimes, because you know, we think of things as yoga like being relaxing, right, without understanding that actually they are very effective though, and that's because they do still tax your body and they do still work the muscles. And so it's about understanding that balance of what is gentle, where your body is getting the stimulation, getting the movement, getting all the things that it needs to be able to sort of detox and
Mhm.
cleanse and all that stuff without overtaxing your system. And I found that a very challenging thing to figure out for myself. And then I didn't realize that the answer could be just be as so simple as go for a walk. Like literally, that's all I had to do. It was like the most gentle, most effective way for me to walk off stress, but also reset the system and give myself the movement that I needed, was just go for a nice long walk. And
Yes.
you know, it seems too simple. You're like, but I should be doing this workout and I should be doing that thing and I should be
Mhm.
doing this thing. But
And I'm glad
you
you
know,
brought
it
that
doesn't have.
up because it's all about the shoulds that happen. And I feel that we get so stuck in the shoulds. It's like, oh, well, you know, you could be exhausted lying there. And it's like, oh, I really should go for a walk today. I know how important it is to get exercise in. I really should be eating like this, or I really should be reducing carbs or increasing carbs, or I really should be cutting calories, or that there's a whole bunch of shoulds. And we tend to go to we ask ourselves, what are we supposed to be doing, instead of asking ourselves, what do we really need? What does our body need? And what is our body asking of us? That I think is the most.
Yes, that's really important.
Mhm, mhm,
So I think everyone listening, I think maybe that's like a takeaway in terms of action from this episode, to sort of think like, what is it that my body needs, and see if you can like journal on that, test out a few things. There's no pressure to get it right the first time, because it takes a few tries until you can figure it out. But try and work out like, what does my body like? What makes it feel good? What makes it feel strong? What makes it feel like energized once I've done it, not depleted after I've done it, and then potentially work out
mhm,
like, okay, how can I fit this now into my routine? Like, where does it fit into my day, and how can I do more of this thing that makes me feel good? And when I first started doing the walking, I didn't have time in my day to do like hour-long walks or 2 hour
mhm,
long walks. I started with like 10 to 15 minutes, and it made me feel so good that it made me want to carve out more time to do it. So I
mhm.
extended it to half an hour, and then it became 1 hour, and then it became 2 hours, and then it was just like, I now have solid time in my week to make sure I get those walks in, because I know how good it makes me
Yes,
feel.
and you bring up a really great point with that as well, because for a lot of people, they start to think that it has to be taxing if I'm exercising. If I'm doing something, it has to feel like huff puff and I'm out of breath. Then I'm being healthy. Then I'm working towards balancing hormones. Then I can lose the weight. When in reality, it it's actually, it has to do more with how are you feeling, what's going on, and creating that balance with your body.
Yes. And we've talked quite a lot about the movement side, and I love to move to the food side of things, because this is, again, super fascinating. Because, you know, there's all this talk about sort of like, you know, you should do keto, or you should do
Mhm,
like this diet, or you should do that diet. But actually, when it comes to hormone balancing, one of the things that surprised me is how important it is for women, especially when you're trying to balance those
mhm,
hormones, to get carbs in, but the right type of carbs and at the right time of day. Like there's a little bit of like a formula, or like a little bit of a thing of getting this right, because you can eat the wrong type of carbs at the wrong type of day and you could mess it all up all over
yeah.
again. But at the same time, like just going fully keto isn't always the answer either, because that can do more damage in the beginning than good. So I'd love to
Yeah,
dive
well,
into that side of things.
first off, every program has its place, right? So for some people, and for like, if somebody's listening and they are on keto, they're like, I love keto. What are you talking about? Great. right. If you love keto, you're probably not in adrenal fatigue or you don't have issues with your cortisol levels. It really has
Yeah.
to do with what is going on with your hormones. And that's why a lot of times you do get somebody who's doing a program, they love it, they're getting weight loss results, they're feeling energized, and their friend is saying, I don't understand it. I'm not getting any results. In fact, I might even be gaining weight from this. So what is going on?
Yes.
So if you're going through specifically shifts in your estrogen levels, for those of you as well going through thyroid issues, thyroid is very much connected to your carbohydrate metabolism, and cortisol is also very much related to your carbohydrate metabolism. Doing very low or ketogenic programs are going to create more of an imbalance with, or possibly create an imbalance with thyroid, with cortisol, and with estrogen shifts. So there's got to be some balance. You've got to eat carbs and complex carbohydrates. And when we're talking specifically about cortisol, the time that you need your cortisol to be suppressed the most is when you're about to go to bed, right? You don't want to have that wake up in the middle of the night or problems going to sleep and tossing and turning. You want to sleep soundly. You want the cortisol turned off. And so that dinner time and nighttime is so powerful to eat complex carbohydrates before you go to bed. And I don't mean just eat a bowl of, cereal or something like that and then go to bed immediately right after. What I mean is when you're carving out your dinner time, maybe at 6, and you're going to go to bed at 9, can I say, or 10 or 11, whatever the case may be, you have a few hours before that dinner time so you can digest the food and allow it to start to create that healthy suppression of cortisol at nighttime. So carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates at night are one of the most powerful things that you can do.
So I was gonna say, when I read that, I was so surprised because I had been on keto for a while then, and I felt okay I was doing well on keto. Like the weight was coming off, and some of the brain fog was lifting, and all that kind of stuff. But then, after a few weeks of doing it, I started to realize that actually at nighttime, like my energy is a little bit unsettled. Like I'm not feeling as good as I was like in the first 2 or 3 weeks, where I was sort of like adapting, and that's when I read about that actually something like sweet potato or some of those veggies are good for building the hormones. And once I started incorporating them a few times a week, it all started to shift because then I slept better and then I felt better. And then it was like, oh, this is the mix of how things work. But could you talk us through sort of like what would be some of the best sort of hormone supporting foods that women could incorporate into their diet?
Number one, without a doubt, it is going to be beans and legumes, lentils, all of that sort of fun stuff. The bean family, because it's also high in fiber, which means that you are going to release out the sugars from that very slowly. And that's going to, again, allow the balance not only of cortisol starting to bring it down at nighttime, but also insulin, right? Because you don't want to start to eat a whole bunch of white rice or white bread at nighttime that's then going to spike insulin, and then you're creating another hormone balance altogether. So you're looking for something like beans, legumes, lentils. A serving of that, even a half cup, can make a huge difference in your balancing out those hormone levels. So by far they're number one. Very high fiber foods, those are absolutely what you're looking for. Most of us do not get the amount of fiber that we need. It's about 25 grams to 30 grams of fiber per day. And a lot of times, I'd say 95% of the people that start with me are at about 17 grams when I do their nutrition check. So that's quite low. And I don't know if you had any issues with going to the washroom as well being on keto, but when you are on a very, very low carb diet, one of the effects for many people is that they're not getting in the fiber that they need. So they end up having constipation issues, which then again, you're creating toxins in the body. You're not going to be able to balance out your hormones as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was very mindful about nuts, seeds, and beans. Like that was always very much a part, like green leafy veg and all the really fibrous sort of veg. So like the keto it was like whole food keto, so there was quite a bit of fiber. But I know the days where maybe like I didn't have the nuts or I didn't make sure I was like mindfully incorporating some of those more fiber based foods. Then yes, it can cause issues with that, definitely.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, you start to get more awake at night. Like you're noticing it's hard to sleep. And that is because those cortisol levels are rising or they're staying very high and they're not dropping down. And that all has to do with the fact that your body just saying, I need a little bit of carbohydrates. And then on the off side of that, when you wake up in the morning, when you have a lower carbohydrate breakfast, when you're doing the proteins in the morning, then you're allowing that natural rise of cortisol to come. So let's say you had that cortisol in the morning suppressed and you're feeling really tired. Well, if you start to have a higher protein breakfast, then you can start to ask your cortisol to rise when it's supposed to rise in the morning. And that can help as well. So proteins in the morning, and by the time it's nighttime, the carbohydrates.
That's great, I think. And then I think that's really useful advice for anyone that's struggling with any of that. Try making those really small but easy shifts to actually incorporate in your day to see, does that help with your cortisol cycle? Does that help you sleep better, but also wake up feeling better as well? I think just on that point about the morning and the cortisol meant to be spiked, meant to be up in the morning. I think one of the other sides of this is light. So I don't know if we can maybe touch on just like light and how important that is in the morning, but also at nighttime, and about, devices and how all of that affects our cortisol levels
Oh,
as well.
yeah, totally. Because when you wake up in the morning, our natural cortisol cycle, you can actually start to elevate that cortisol level by being exposed to light. And even if you have the lights in your house that are very bright, they are still only about 1/10 of the amount of brightness of going outside, even on a cloudy day. So, one of the best things that you can do to
Yeah.
start to regulate your cortisol level is get natural sunlight. Maybe go to a big window or step outside for 5 minutes, even on a cloudy day. And especially, I know for when a lot of us were going through isolation with COVID, those cycles tended to get off because nobody was going outside, nobody was seeing the windows. And so, again, it was like staying awake longer at nighttime or waking up and not feeling rested, and those cycles got up. So just exposing yourself to natural sunlight in the morning is so important. And then, as you probably already know, the devices that we use, the computer, the television, the laptop, the phone, all of that sort of stuff emits this light that has a very similar effect. It's not quite the same, but it's still very similar effect. So you're spiking your cortisol levels. And guess what? Most people are looking at these devices in their bedroom before sleep, when it's supposed to be that time to shut everything off and start to relax those cortisol levels down and increase the melatonin. You actually, when you're using those devices, you're suppressing your melatonin levels, which is horrible because a lot of women say, I just can't sleep at night. Maybe should I take a melatonin supplement? What should I do? Well, how about we first start, very first step, just turning off all of your devices, even an hour, if not two, before you go to sleep. Stop looking at the devices. And definitely don't have them in your bedroom.
Yes, and these are two things that I had to get very disciplined about, because especially during lockdown, it's very easy to go from like, I'm working and then I'm putting the kids to bed and I have to go back to work to finish off things that I need to do, and then I'm going straight to bed and then I'm waking up first thing in the morning and I'm using my devices again, and
Mhm,
literally you can go around in that very harmful cycle of having such disrupted sleep,
mhm,
but also such poor quality sleep as well, because then when the devices are in the same room and there's no partition between your work environment and your sleep
yeah,
environment, because I work from the bedroom, um it becomes a very dangerous cycle, because you literally are always thinking about work, always thinking about the stuff you have to wake up and do in the morning,
mhm,
all the stuff you have to get prepared. And literally, it's like 1 meter between where your laptop is and where your bed is. And it becomes very, very easy to fall into that pattern of actually spiking your cortisol at all the wrong times, and then being up at night because you can't go back to sleep, or just having very unrested sleep because you're not able to shut down like effectively. And then the one last thing I would maybe say is also making sure that your windows are completely blacked out at
mhm,
nighttime. So sometimes when you have kids, you have night lights on. Like we have an eco light in the corridor, so we used to have the corridor light on in case they wanted to wake up in the night and had to come find us, or in case but that actually really disrupts our sleep patterns,
mhm,
because when there's it can be the tiniest amount of light, but your body's so sensitive
mhm.
that it will not allow itself to properly turn itself off unless it has to be proper pitch black. And so then we went round the house and like try to block everything out at 9 time and get proper opaque everything and turn off the corridor lights and everything, because it then started to this whole amazing quality of sleep. So even if you're sleeping less, you're still getting a good quality of sleep, which is something that we were missing because of
It's
the light
so funny you
issues.
mentioned that. I am so sensitive to light. For the longest time, we had an alarm clock inside of the bedroom, and I would take scarves and everything else and just wrap it up because even an inch of that light getting through, I would be awake and I'd be staring at this weird little red light, this beam coming out. It was so. I definitely need to be one of those people that has absolutely no light going on anywhere. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Everything has to be blacked out. Yeah, and I think that that's hard
Yeah.
too for a lot of people that love watching their TV before bed, or it can be so hard to do that.
Yeah.
But even like you mentioned, if it's at all possible to have a completely separate room where you're able to work, or where you're able to have, okay, that's TV room, and now I'm going into the bedroom, and that's going to be my blacked out room. That would be the best case scenario. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was just taking mindful steps of like when I finish with that laptop, even though I have to work from my bedroom because that's where I
Mhm.
have the quiet space and desktop, but moving that to somewhere else when I'm done with it so that it's not still in the room when I'm going to sleep. So I'm not attached, like, you're sort of energetically like attached to this thing that's calling you, like, wake up and there's more stuff to do on me, like, come over here. It is so easy to just fall into that trap, So it's just about taking those mindful steps of saying, you know what, when we're done with devices, everybody's devices get shut down, everybody's devices go downstairs where we're not there, and we go to sleep in rooms that are completely free of all those little distractions and lights and radiation and everything
And it's
else.
funny you mentioned that
I
as
think,
well. When I'm starting to feel that my cortisol levels are shifting, because it's a forever process trying to keep them in balance, right? I will
yeah,
hear my phone calling me sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night. I hear it in the other room, like, just come see if there's something on me. Like, should I go and check on? And it's
yeah,
like, oh gosh, don't do it. Don't do it. My phone has to be downstairs. I have to be upstairs. Phone has to be downstairs, or I will look if I'm going through one of those times, and then the cycle will start.
yes.
And I don't want to go there.
Yeah, I'll just check what the time is. I'll just check if someone replied to my post. I'll just have a quick check, and then you're up for like 3 hours and you haven't come back to sleep. And it's so easy. I mean, this is one of the things, isn't it? It's just such an easy thing to just like trip up in, and it becomes a cycle because then it becomes a habit, and bodies like habits and routines, whether they're negative or positive is like another story. And so when you get into a negative routine, your body likes it because it's comfortable to go through the motions of a routine that you're following, and it may not be healthy for you. Um, Thank you so much, Alicia. I think there's been so many amazing little nuggets for people to take away and really understand their hormones and sort of like learn how to control them rather than letting the hormones sort of take over. Do you have any last bits of advice or action or takeaway that you'd like to leave the audience with before we end the episode
I
today?
think the most powerful thing, the action step that you can take right now that is so easy, is just as you were saying, just ask yourself daily, how am I feeling? What's going on with my body? What what is my body telling me? Because just by doing that, something as simple as that, then you can start to really understand, is this, am I actually feeling stressed because my life is busy? Do I feel fine, but I'm getting these energized moments where I'm not sleeping well at night? Or is it that, especially if you're going through perimenopause or you're starting to go through menopause, is this related to my hormones? Because life could be great right now and I'm getting moments of anxiety or moments where I just can't lose that weight. And so, really, the best thing and the simplest thing you can do is just ask yourself how you're feeling.
I love that so much. I mean, sometimes the best solutions are just the simplest ones. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't have to be hard. It just needs to be those really simple little things that you can do for
Hmm.
yourself. Thank you so much again for coming on and sharing all that amazing wisdom with us, because I think, or I know that there'll be many people listening to this who are going to take away so much information, but also be able to put that into action. So if you've taken anything away from this episode, please tell us what your biggest takeaways are, or tell us what that one action is that you're going to take after listening today. And if you'd like to find Alicia and the work that she does, then all her links will be in the episode show notes. So please be sure to check them out because she does fantastic
Aw,
work.
thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
we really hope to. We really hope to see you back on another episode of the Back to Health podcast, and the links, as always, are in the episode show notes. Thank you again for listening and for sharing your time with us. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you would like any of the links or the show notes, you can follow them in the description below. And for more episodes of the Back to Health podcast, please be sure to follow us on YouTube, or you can follow us on Spreaker, where we host our podcast. Thanks again, and I look forward to joining you for another episode of the Back to Health podcast. Until then, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay informed.